There are few foods that warm the body and soul like chicken broth with carrots and pasta. When I was growing up, my mother would tell me it's good for what ails you, and if nothing ails you, it's good for that, too. Lydia Pinkham of Lynn, Massachusetts, knew a thing or two about what ails you and built an empire on it. I'll tell you about her and make a hearty meal on a Sterno Stove in this encore presentation of Making a Mess with the Yankee Camper Chicken Noodle Soup. This is the mise en place for the chicken noodle soup recipe. In order to make the chicken noodle soup, you're going to need 1 can of chicken breast, 5 ounces, a snack-sized package of diced carrots, a quarter of a cup of some type of macaroni. I have selected rotini macaroni, and we'll put that into its own separate baggie. I've marked the bag so that I can identify it should it get mixed up as chicken soup macaroni. I also am going to add spices. Now, I have already put the spices into a small package, and this is marked chicken soup ingredients. And in here are 1 teaspoon of chicken bouillon granules, a half a teaspoon of parsley flakes, 1 teaspoon of minced onion, a quarter of a teaspoon of minced garlic, 1.5 teaspoons of celery flakes, and a pinch of black pepper. I'm going to place all of these into my bag marked chicken noodle soup. So put the can in first, and then the carrots. Next will go the chicken soup ingredients and the noodles. Lastly, not as part of the recipe itself, but as part of the meal, I am going to add in a package of crackers. These are the Captain's wafers with cream cheese and chive, and these will go into my bag as well. I'll seal this up, and it will be ready to go when I'm out in the field and preparing to eat. Lydia Estes was born in Lynn, Massachusetts in the year 1819 to a middle-class Quaker family. This is the same year that a sea serpent is reportedly spotted near Long Beach. The family was relatively progressive, and at the age of 24, Lydia married Isaac Pinkham, a widowed shoe manufacturer and land speculator. Mrs. Pinkham had been a teacher but left the vocation. However, she was known among her neighbors and friends for her homemade remedies. In 1854, John King created a book called American Dispensatory, in which he had lists of herbs and their medical uses. It's believed Lydia owned a copy of this book. Sometime during this period, Isaac was offered a recipe for herbal remedies, which became the basis for the famous vegetable compound. It's believed to have contained unicorn root, life root, black cohosh, pleurisy root, and fenugreek seed. Also, it was preserved in 19% alcohol. Lydia believed that the recipe could be used to help women who were dealing with falling of the womb and other female weaknesses. After the Civil War,
Many people turned to country cures like vegetable pills and sarsaparilla-based tonics. Women especially preferred to rely on home remedies. Lydia understood the appeal of a woman selling to women, and she wrote the company's first piece of advertising, a 4-page pamphlet called A Guide for Women. However, she relied on her two middle sons, Will and Dan, to deal with the marketing, money, and selling of the vegetable compound. Dan circulated the health guides when he was on his mail route before setting off to Brooklyn, New York to try hawking the compound in the big city. Dan tried advertising in parks and cemeteries with postcard-like cards that featured faux inscriptions written on them. It was during this time that the Brooklyn Bridge was all the rage, including conman George C. Parker, who is purported to have sold it as much as twice a week. One of the cards Dan made showed the Brooklyn Bridge draped end to end with a banner hyping the compound. This actually never happened. Dan also thought that adding his mother's portrait to the advertisements would give more validity to the product. Will put the ads in many newspapers and periodicals. Lydia E. Pinkham became a sensation with her medical compound, even having drinking songs sung about her at colleges.
I'll finish with Miss Lydia in a moment, but first let's head out to the park and start our soup. I don't have any endorsements for making these videos, but there is a cost associated with things like campsite fees and supplies. This channel runs on coffee. If you enjoy the work that I do in creating these videos and would like to help out with expenses, please consider buying me a cup of coffee. It doesn't need to be much, just a couple of dollars. I'll put a link in the description. Now, let's get back to the video. I'm here at Lions Park in Salisbury, Massachusetts, and today I'm going to make, with my mess kit, a chicken noodle soup recipe.
And we're going to start by putting together the Sterno Stove, then measuring out 1.5 cups of water into the pot.
So the second step that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and light this sterno. Now with sterno you have to be careful in the daylight because it's very difficult to see the flame, and so you have to use the hand test to make sure that that's working, which it is. Be sure to close the cover on the front of the stove and put the lid on. While that water heats, we're going to take the ingredients out of our bag. And we have a package of crackers, which we'll eat later. Our 1/4 cup of noodles. Spices. Can of chicken breast. And diced carrots. This will take about 15 minutes or so to heat using the sterno. Meanwhile, while that's going, I'm going to clean up a little bit. Let me show you what it looks like inside. This water has been on for about 2 minutes, and you can see there are small bubbles starting to form on the bottom of the pot. So it's been about 12 minutes and the water is starting to boil. I will show you what that looks like. You can see that it is got bubbles forming and starting to come up. I'm going to give it another minute or so, and then we'll add in the remaining ingredients. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open the carrots just slightly. I don't want to open them all the way, but enough to expose the liquid. Open the pot. and we'll just pour the liquid right into the pan. I'm also going to do the same thing with the chicken. I'm not going to open it all the way. Just going to open it a slight bit and pour that chicken broth right into the pan. That smells good. I'm going to empty the contents of the spices in, and using my spoon, I'm just going to stir those around. Get all that delicious goodness in there. I'm going to cover the pot again and let that come up to boil again. Well, it's been about 2 minutes, and so I'm going to empty in our rotini and let that cook uncovered for approximately 6 minutes. As you can see, there is bubbles coming up from the bottom. It's a very slow boil using the Sterno Stove, but it will cook it through. Take your spoon, just gently stir the mixture. This will make certain that all of those celery flakes and the bouillon all mix together.
In 1881, both Dan and Will died of tuberculosis within 2 months of each other. Then Lydia passed away in 1883 after a paralytic stroke. This left son Charles and daughter Adeline and their spouses in charge of the business. Under their direction, the Lydia E. Pinkham Medicine Company endured and grew, capitalizing on Lydia's image and answering correspondence in her name. The expansion of products included blood medicine, sedative wash, and liver tablets. It was at this time they began to rely on less than scrupulous ad agents to propel the company forward. Around 1911, Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound had become known as a cure-all for most diseases and started drawing criticism. In the 1940s and 50s, the FDA made modifications that required labeling of the formula to be clearer. The company was purchased by Cooper Laboratories for $1 million in 1968 and is turned over twice more since. Lydia E. Pinkham's products are now manufactured by Newmark Brands as Lydia Pinkham Herbal Supplements. So was Lydia Pinkham the Queen of Quackery? I believe she was simply a pioneer in alternative medicine. She, along with the women who used her elixir, believed that the herbal concoction could repair and treat women's issues. She was probably not misguided for her time. However, she's also become identified as one of the greatest hucksters of all time. Now you know. That soup has been cooking for about 7 to 8 minutes. I'm going to just check the pasta to see how done it is. Perfect. Open the can of chicken. Empty that right into the pot. Stir that chicken in. I take a little bit of the broth and put it in to get all the bits of the chicken out. Put
this aside. Open the carrots. Pour the contents of the carrots in. Mix that about. If you're using a sterno, like I am, you'll probably want to put the cover back on and let it cook for another 2 to 3 minutes, just to heat through. If you're using a gas stove, the heat is much hotter and you won't need to cover it because it will be able to maintain a slow simmer. But with the sterno being a much cooler heat, putting the cover on will allow the soup to cook through. Well, that's been cooking for about another 2 or 3 minutes, and I am going to take my pot holder and just place it here. Remove the soup from the stove, leaving it covered for now, and then I'm going to extinguish the sterno. Now to do that, and I'm working a little backwards here, but I have this that I've adapted. It's basically a paint can opener to allow me to open a can of sterno that doesn't have a screw type top, a lid from a jar, and I've just screwed them together, and I'm going to place that right over the top of that, and it will extinguish that fire. So let's take a peek inside. Look at that soup. I feel relatively confident that Mr. Campbell never made soup that looked like that out of a can. Well, I appreciate your watching. I hope you feel confident that you can use your mess kit to make something like this chicken noodle soup. I'm going to eat this with my crackers,
and then I'll clean up my mess. If you've enjoyed this video, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up. It just lets YouTube know that you enjoy the videos that I'm putting out. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. I put out a video every week on the recipes that I make in my mess kit, the places that I camp around New England, and the gear that I use. If you have any thoughts, share them in the comments section. In the meantime, I hope you'll get outside, and thank you for watching.